formerly known as Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. This podcast has evolved its identity to better reflect its core mission, connecting the complete cycle of digital innovation to tangible business growth. Your host, Mahesh Iyer, brings you conversations that matter, featuring industry leaders who are driving real results in e-commerce, marketing, and technology. No fluff, no buzzwords, just actionable insights you can implement today to drive revenue tomorrow. Whether you're scaling a startup or transforming an enterprise, the Revenue Circle helps you connect the dots between digital strategy and your bottom line. And now, here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new season with a new star, the new episode, the Revenue Circle podcast with me, Mr. Mahesh Iyer. I've got an amazing guest today, Michelle Allbon, CEO and co-founder of Fractional Directory. So everybody, welcome back to Revenue Circle, the podcast where we deep dive into strategies, insights, and stories that drive revenue growth in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm your host, Mahesh Iyer. So here we go. Welcome, Michelle. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Michelle, why don't you just tell about yourself to the audience, what you do?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's a common thing amongst us fractional leaders that you try to summarize what you've done, and because we worked in so many fractions, they all add up to quite a large number of things. Hey, so the easiest way to contextualize me is that I am a fractional chief revenue officer, but I also have kind of accidentally become the CEO and co-founder of a company that is working in the fractional leadership market. And my history before doing this was working for large global corporate tech, including Cisco, Oracle, Salesforce, a couple big brand names. And I've lived and worked all over the world. I spent 8 years in San Francisco, a couple years in London, and now, confusingly based on my accent, I am based permanently in New Zealand.
So, Michelle, let's start with the big picture, the word fractional. You've been deeply embedded in the fractional leadership space. So in your view, I'm also trying to figure out APAC market in terms of fractional. In your view, fractional leadership actually a market yet, particularly in APAC? What do you think?
Yeah, so we're having a lot of very spirited debate about this at the groups that I'm in that are trying to kind of formalize the market. I'm on the board of the Fractional Leadership Alliance, which is the first attempt globally at having an industry association in this space. And when we discuss is fractional a market, I tend to have a slightly different perspective sitting in New Zealand than those sitting in the United States, where certainly, arguably,
Yes.
it is a market. It's something that has traction. There's consistent mechanisms to buy. There's a lot more stratification of what is and isn't fractional. Whereas out here in broadly APAC and certainly in Australia and New Zealand, the definition's a little bit more gray. And part of the reason that we built a technology to help define and organize this is to try to make it a market. So I have a lot more to say about it, but in short, I would say yes, it's a market in the US, and in the rest of the world, it's certainly still emerging.
Right. We fractionals get these terms often when we speak to clients. They say, "Oh, you're a consultant." That's a first. So I had to give them a pause and then to explain to them what a fractional is, what a consultant is. Of course, it's more getting matured in India. I want to know what are the indicators, signal for a person who's entering the APAC market would be from your side.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, when we built a directory, the point of a directory is to list everybody within a geography that fits. So we had to pick parameters and say this does and does not qualify. And so what we did is we designed this around, if you think about academics, if you're studying business, you're either choosing a major or a double major. I mean, sure, maybe there's some triple majors, but usually you're picking one or two core domains that you're focusing on. And the industry and the market that is growing is in fractional leadership. And the easiest way to put people in a company is at that top line. So that's C or C minus one. And that is an area of business, marketing, sales, legal, Now, if you come from a background of transformation or strategy or product marketing or sales enablement or these kind of subdomains, the challenge is that doesn't fit very nicely into the box, right? But what we are encouraging people to do when they think about branding themselves fractionally is just to choose the title that is the highest domain. And then even if they have subdomain speciality, that's fine. But for an organization to effectively use them as fractional, you need to be responsible for the entire line of business. And you need to be reporting ideally into the CEO or the founder directly so that you're truly sitting in a leadership bench. And that's very different than consulting, right? Because consultants have the ability to go between multiple lines of business. And that's a distinct difference.
I know you and me, we have spoken about, and you mentioned about using the right designation, you can say, or the right title. You and me, we spoke a lot about sales enablement. So before I hit to that, which is our very favorite topic. So before that, I want to understand, how do you differentiate? I mean, you made a strong distinction between a CRO, fractional CRO, and a fractional sales leader. Why does this matter, and how you set expectation with the founders and the companies?
Yeah, definitely. So another kind of point of inquiry that we have further validated in building a directory and then adding 1,000 people to it is we started by saying, okay, what are each of those roles? And does the deliverables that each of those roles would offer to a company fractionally cover the whole scope of what's needed? And what we found is in certain domains, technology is one of them, and definitely go to market, a CRO tends to have a different scope than a sales leader because sales leader, it tends to be much more hands-on, much closer to driving revenue, whereas a CRO doesn't necessarily not have anything to do with that, but they need to be making sure that the structures are in place and that the entire go-to-market plan is working before then going and putting somebody to go out and hunt and close revenue. And I think that this is something that happens wrong quite a lot, that companies go, I'd like to hire a CRO because we need to go and close, $1 million in a month or whatever. But then if you get into that organization and there isn't a clear go to market, then it doesn't make sense to go out and hunt. So those are two different personas of people. Someone that's a fractional sales leader that can go and hunt themselves or run the team that's hunting versus the CRO that's going in and saying, are we set up to have all the right channels, to have all the right mechanisms to sell? Is the structure there before we go and start pouring gasoline on the team to go and push the structure? So we're like one step above the actual sales mechanism as a CRO.
I love what you said. Adding to that, typically, I always believe CROs are somebody who does the revenue leakages plugging. Like if there is a revenue leakage between marketing and sales and customer success, you rightly said, sales leader would be somebody who would drive and ensure that the revenue is achieved. He will go to the market, get those business, get those sales team to drive the business. CRO is
Exactly.
more about, I would call him a revenue architect. This is what I try to call myself. More like
Absolutely. That's so accurate.
somebody who design, how the revenue has to come, whether it is demand generation, whether it is sales, or whether it is cross-sell and expansion from customer success. So he aligns all three together. He's the umbrella for all the three is what I believe. So lovely. I love the point. Again, the soft spot, sales enablement. How has things changed over the period? I know now everybody is talking about AI. In fact, everything is AI. Even the content is AI. It's very easy to tell you it's AI content or it's a content written by somebody, a human. So how do in this all this noise, what is your thought on sales enablement?
So it's really interesting. I was responsible for building a whole sales enablement organization. And when I was doing that, this would have been probably 7 years ago, there was a couple different software technologies that were specializing in this space that were trying to help people create content. Actually, one based in India, which is the one that we actually went with. And the whole challenge that the software was trying to solve was there is too much content and it's disorganized, and we actually need to create essentially an LMS, like a learning system, the same way as you'd be doing education, but internally and specifically for sales to ensure that people are understanding and being able to correctly retain the information at the speed that the company is going. And that was one of the biggest problems. And this happens with acquisitions and with companies that are going through a lot of change is the salespeople need to be up to date on all the moving and changing parts, right? And if they aren't, then that could risk completely driving a deal in the wrong direction. And so we were looking at it, I think, in a way that was very different than most people in the world. I think sales enablement often turns into this kind of teaching, slightly academic, here's how you do things. Whereas we were actually looking at it as a communication function and trying to figure out how can we creatively create content that people understand and remember. So I had a whole set of, visual designers and a whole creative team that we'd make YouTube style content and then we'd throw it into an LMS and we'd make people watch it and test them on it. And it really was almost like a progressive next generation, like university kind of experience, but people were getting this knowledge in real time. And when I compare that to a lot of my friends who are currently in sales enablement, a lot of them complain that there isn't a clear lane for it to live in. Like sometimes that becomes marketing because you're doing content. And some of what you're doing is internal and some of it is external. And sales enablement as a field, when I was in it, was really just beginning because it used to be vendor led. So you just hire the best couple vendors that would teach you how to sell and then you're over, and then it pivoted to something that became very like in-house academic and, ex salespeople would join sales enablement and then teach people at scale what they learned. And I think that as a field, it has continued to evolve, but it has never quite found its soul. Like a lot of my friends that are now leading sales enablement organizations are still complaining about the same things I was complaining about 7 years ago. And that's why as a fractional, it's interesting. And I actually went a level up because I found that running a sales enablement organization was frustrating me because I was trying to do the strategy and the architecture as you're describing for an aspect of the sales, but I lacked the right organizational capital and placement to be able to make those changes. So I tend, when I'm a fractional CRO, to actually do sales enablement, but people don't know that that's what it is. It's just like my scope is revenue and that's part of it, right?
Sales enablement is more like I always believed, and you rightly said, it's more like a discipline. You need to get your
Exactly.
entire organization into a discipline where you're automating a lot of aspect of the business. For example,
Yes.
ensure that your sales team is, filling all the details in Salesforce or in the CRM. Most of the time they don't do it. We all know globally, everybody says that a CRM is only used 10%. Actually, it's true. I mean, I've seen it across organizations where Salesforce or a CRM is used like a database, not like a mechanism or a science or a method where they'll be able to use it for forecasting the right pipeline, the right activity, see that the deals are getting closed. Sales enablement is, as I said, if you and me start talking, the entire podcast will be about sales enablement. So
Absolutely. And this is nudging into RevOps, which is another sorted discipline. There's a lot of these little pieces that have come into here, and everyone's just trying to grasp at revenue. And that's why it's easier in the fractional world to just go, rather than living in those spaces, like just hang out at the revenue line and then figure it all out.
that's why we are this revenue architect. That's why the architecture of revenue covers everything. RevOps is one of the most important critical aspect of it, just like driving business or getting those demand to come in. I love that. You made a fascinating transition from a CRO to a CEO of a technology startup. So I just want to take your brain and say, how you have your sales skills translated into running a company, and what's been your biggest learning curve?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, I've worked at a lot of different maturities of company. Like out of school, I was in a Series A startup in San Francisco. And then, I went into giant corporations and I would be in, director level at huge, massive global corporations. And then when I moved to New Zealand, I worked with like very small, very first couple people startups. And so from that lens, what my view was of a CEO's role or a founder's role has evolved significantly it being one now. I think I had a lot of assumptions that were wrong. And one of my assumptions was that the founder or CEO's job was to kind of know everything and you had to be like truly deep across every single discipline. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to be one. And that's why I never aspired to it. I was like, no, I'm never going to start a company because, I know my lane. And then what's really interesting is that the more I've worked as a CRO, the more I'm like, wow, actually, I really do need to know every lane because I need to understand product and I need to understand the implications of engineering to product and I need to understand revenue and I need to understand operations. And so what's funny is that being in a CRO function actually, I think, was a really cool prerequisite to me being comfortable to go, no, I actually know the architecture of a whole company. I don't just understand the architecture of revenue. And I wouldn't have expected that. And then as we started tinkering around, me and my co-founder, and she's an incredible CTO. So she's very much that side of the house. So the two of us are a good complement because I'm the business and she's the tech.
Right.
We would start kind of talking about things. And I was going, wow, yeah, I do know about that. I do understand those dynamics. And so taking on the role as founder, but explicitly CEO because I'm responsible for our whole extended team of bench that are in each of these domains because we work in a fractional model. It's really empowered me because it's made me go, I don't actually need to be an expert. The job of CEO is actually being the ultimate generalist and knowing your place to have people be able to do what they're excellent at. And that's what makes a good CEO.
CEO is always a salesperson because a CEO has to still go and sell. If you're a founder of a small startup or a early stage startup, you are a sales guy, you are a CEO, you're
100%.
everything. So, is there any specific methodology, that sales methodology, which applies for a CEO? I mean, what does he needs to do different?
Yeah, I think it really, really depends on the path of the company that you're building. So, like, for instance, we are 2 years in, and for the first, I would say, 18 months of these 2 years, we were very much forecasting this as a project intentionally. The amount of capacity we were putting into it, we were just like, you know what, this is not something that's going to be our full capacity. So, I was very much just kind of like, okay, I'll take on the role, but, I'm not. This is not my whole thing. And then in the last 6 months or so, we really had this clarity that it has legs. And then now we're in this stage, which startups go through of going, okay, well, then how do we pay for ourselves and justify and fund us working on this full time? And so now I am going into the world, which is completely new for me, of doing fundraising and all the different opportunities there are to fundraise and the different choices that you have. And it's really interesting because from like a sales methodology, fundraising is quite literally sales. Like you're building a pitch deck, you're putting together a revenue model, you're justifying why somebody's investment and what you're building is good. And so it's really funny because I'm sitting here going, well, that's wild. Like this is essentially sales. And I'm having to architect a whole structure and a plan for the next 3 years and for an exit to basically understand how a business is going to go. And this skill of forecasting is actually something that I think you don't realize when you're a salesperson how valuable that is. And then if you become a founder, you're like, I understand how to steer multiple years out because I had to be successful in my role. So actually it's adjacent to building a company because you need to build something that you can defensively say, is forecastable. And so it's like the two just absolutely marry together perfectly going from that role into a startup founding. kind of position. And I've found that the methodology is like identical. It's what's your sales pipeline and how much confidence do you have in it? And how are you going to go out and find your right persona? And how are you going to ensure that, you're de-risking your opportunities? It's exactly the same thing.
I usually, in the weekends, I attend a lot of events where I go as a judge, look at the pitch events, and I completely resonate with what you say. If a founder is not able to communicate and sell his proposition, most of the time that pitch falls flat. You don't see the drive, you don't see the passion because he's so in tune with his product that he's passionate about the product, but he doesn't know how to take it to the market, how
Exactly.
the GTM is, what's the product market fit, what's the kind of take in the market. So I love what you said. One more thing I wanted to understand: challenges. You had to build a new certain skill set during this process. Any new skill set you had to build because sales
Yeah,
is in your bloodstream. You know that you close your eyes, you can do sales. But anything else
totally.
you had to build as a skill set for you in this role?
Absolutely. I think my co-founder and I love to laugh about this, that when you are a CRO, you can kind of turn a blind eye to things in the product and engineering side that either don't make sense or are not contextualized. And I think that we have had a really good learning experience because she and I are quite good friends and we're in the same life stage. We have young children. And so we have a close enough relationship to be completely blunt with each other. And I'm finding over and over again that I'm like, great, here's how we're going to package this, here's how we're going to frame it, this is the forecast. And she's going, hold on, like, what is the implications of me building that? And how is that scoped? And I don't understand like what you're talking about from a business side. And I find that we always end up back on the same page very much. But I'm so used to speaking in business land and just driving that she needs to actually have her ability to also drive and go, here's our product roadmap and here's how I'm going to make our engineering team like do all of this. That it is super easy for business to get ahead of itself and just like go off piste from tech and product. And it is an absolute skill to stay lockstep. And when things start moving really fast in the business side, to keep the tech in a silo and to actually go, hold on, you need to be in all of these meetings as well. And you and I need to be sitting and talking about our forecast because if any of these things drop, your team is going to need to scale up, by this percent, or this is what your capacity is going to do. And it is an entire skill set to be able to run a balanced tech and business organization. And I think that that's where a lot of this falls over is somebody's very tech centric. And so then they're really uncomfortable with having a business person be a co-founder and drive them really fast. But the two of us are kind of in the middle where she's very good at business, but not as deep as me. And I'm very, to be dangerous enough in tech, but we have to work really hard to be on the same page constantly. And we have to create rhythms to make sure that we are.
Since it just drives right to my point where I've been very honored to have some amazing women guests in my podcast, like Leslie Bennett, Dennis Bachman, and now you have got you. So this question I had to ask, I can't resist asking. Let's talk about, the diversity in fractional leadership. You're building a company as a female executive and raising two young children. How has the fractional model made this possible? I mean, in a way, ways traditional employee might not have.
Yeah, no, it's a really excellent question because it has made it possible full stop. I look at my career path before having children and my kind of the realities of my life right now. I have almost 1 year old and an almost 4 year old. So I have, really young little boys, and the reality of being able to be both a CRO and also running a company in my old world would have been being on a plane likely to a different country once a week. I mean, I lived like that for a long time. And it would also mean needing to be more than 40 hours because 40 hours wouldn't cut it. Like it would need to be 40 hours plus all the drinks after work and all the things. And I kind of assumed that I was going to hit a wall as soon as I had kids. And to be completely honest, I was really hesitant for that reason. We waited a long time to have kids because I just thought, I'm like the only female CRO I know. And then I have children. Like, how am I going to do this? I just kind of thought there was no pathway for it. And what's been really incredible is that as a fractional CRO and now as a startup founder using a fractional model, we're building from a place of constraint, and that's actually fine. So I work 3 days a week and I go, I wish I could do more and, throw more hours at this. But the reality is we're building from this constraint. And it's not just me. It's not that I'm a woman with kids and so that's why I have 3 days. It's that everybody on our team is building from constraint for different reasons. Some of them, it's not that. They just, they have 2 clients. And so 3 days is all they can give. And what we've found is that building from a place of that constraint is great because you make better decisions and you waste less time. And it wasn't true that we had to be working in that other way to be able to accomplish the same outcomes. And I think that's kind of the dirty secret of fractional is that everybody who's in full-time work assume you just need to throw hours at things and you can never be in the right rooms if you're not at those events. And it's like, actually, I'm really choosy and it hasn't hurt my network and it hasn't hurt my ability to lead. And I think that as a female, in a very, very heavily male dominated space, that is exciting because that shows to other women that are younger than me that they're not going to have to hit a ceiling and not have a career after they have kids.
Let's talk about your another baby, which you have, which is Fractional Directory.
Yes,
So let's talk.
my third child.
Yeah. So what problem were you solving when you built this platform, and how do you envision it defining talent organization in this market?
Yeah, I shared it in the beginning, but the big problem was me, as a CRO looking at this and going, this isn't a market. I'm trying to be in something that isn't a defined market. And I'm trying to offer a engagement package that is non-standard and that I have to define every single time I get an engagement. And this is annoying and tiring. And at first I thought, well, the problem is just because it's too early in New Zealand and people don't understand it here. And so the intention for us creating a directory wasn't just personal. It wasn't just for me to get work. It was also for the other people that I had met that were working in this way to be able to just have a proof point that it's real. And when we started the first directory in New Zealand, there was only 43 of us in the whole country doing this. So it wasn't 2, but 43 is not very many people. And so I thought I'm starting a little bit of a education effort. Like that's why I did it, was to try to educate companies and go, look, we even had an education page. So I put all the articles from Forbes and I thought we were building an education company to just be like, look, there's another working model and here's the people in it. And turns out we were actually building a whole entire technology product, but it took us 2 years to know that. And that's classic startup. You think you're building something and you end up building something else.
So any technical challenges in matching fractional talent competition from a traditional recruiting approaches? I mean, the approaches vision for how the platform, the market is quite maturing now. So what's the technical challenge you're facing?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest, and it's funny because it is the technical challenge, but the actual challenge is people not understanding that we are trying to do a completely new greenfield technical category in what we're doing. So there are a lot of people that are collecting the talent in the market as they're coming into it because lots and lots of people are coming to fractional leadership right now all around the world. And those majority of people are making marketplaces, which is curating and selecting some people from that pool. Whereas the technical challenge that we have given ourselves is to actually map every single person within a market. And so we have mapped all of New Zealand and all of Singapore and all of Western Australia because it's small. And we've done that as a LinkedIn development partner that anytime someone changes their title on LinkedIn, they show up just like the old-fashioned yellow pages. They just show up in our directory. And then if they consent to making a bigger, deeper profile, that's where the matching happens. But even just getting the right people and listings and deciding how to structure this, and also making sure that we had our data model correct, that when somebody creates a profile, they find themselves and they can articulate their skills. All of this was very, very hard. And it took us a couple iterations to do it correctly. And I think the reason that we're so excited now and going, okay, this is a thing, is because we had 43 to 100 to 500 to 1,000 people come to us validating that this is both needed and it's different than what else is out there.
So, um, adding to that, the pricing, because the audience in APAC still don't understand how the pricing works for a fractional. Is there any engagement model you suggest to people who are wanting to get into fractional, specifically the APAC region? Because there are people are trying to match the US pricing, which doesn't work because people in APAC are very price conscious. We all know that. So how do you tackle that? And is there any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, it's something we've been thinking about since the beginning because, again, each market has its market value. And then there's a dynamic of, are you working in your market? So you're charging for your market, or are you working remotely? And so in our directories, we ask people to ideally list their rate. And here's a funny story for you. When I created the directory, I put my rate as 1,200 a day. So we say day rates. That's how you charge, never hourly. It's not hourly work. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to take an experiment. I charge more than that, but I'm just going to put 1,200 because that feels reasonable and see what happens. And in New Zealand, what happened is over 50% of the people who created profiles also chose $1,200, because what that's telling me is they don't know what their market rate is. And so they copied mine or the sample set. And so if that's not proof that people genuinely do not know what market value is, and then now the time has gone on, we have averages of market value. And there's a guy out of Australia that's done some study on this to try to figure out market value. And the range is massive. And this is the problem, is that there's not a lot of data on it. And so it's kind of just a finger in the air. And so I think what's really important is to look at things like that, to look at who are you being hired by and what market, charge the market rate of the market you're working in. And I think it's really important for India because people expect to obviously get a discount, just as in New Zealand, they get a
Yeah.
discount working with us. So obviously matching it just to the US may not make sense, but certainly being closer to that than your local market rate is really important.
Excellent point. One of the ways I did it right in the beginning is I mean, you need to figure out, right, what's your hourly rate or, your day rate. How do you figure it out? One of the ways I did it is I used to be a expert in a lot of these analytics companies like ThirdBreak, JLG, and all these guys. And they have a certain rate which they give you for an hour session, let's say $400, 350, 500, depending on your expertise and skills. So I realized probably for the US market, probably that will work. Maybe, like you rightly said, maybe tweak it a little bit for an India or an APAC region where you reduce it marginally and you give that local. These days, everybody does it. Everybody says if you're in India, even that SaaS companies are creating pricing based on the local market. The pricing would be different. You cannot have a same cadence what you are doing in North America and India. So I love your points, and I think so audience will love that. One last question before I go to the fun segment. Looking ahead, what needs to happen for fractional leadership to reach its full potential, particularly in our region, in APAC region?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously quite biased because my belief is that it needs to be formalized and defined as a market, and that is the most important thing. And so, what that means is that instead of communicating ourselves as individuals, and I joke, it drives me crazy when I meet somebody every week that has reinvented fractional, and I keep seeing people show up on LinkedIn and go, I have invented fractional. This is what it is. And it's often well meaning, but what happens is that people are accidentally reinventing the wheel when what they should all be doing is finding these industry level thought leadership and resharing that and saying, I am offering my services as part of the global industry and market, and this is what it is. And feel free to put it into your own words, but cite the global sources that are coming together instead of making it seem like it's a personal brand, because I think that that has really been a problem, especially in our region, is that people try to make it their own IP. And they try to say the competitive advantage in working with me is that I'm not full time. And that is confusing for businesses because it forces a business to align with you, the person, instead of having a market opportunity and you're the most competitive person in that market. So it kind of shoots both people in the foot when that happens.
Absolutely. I think so. When you try to measure it with time, hour and full time, part time, per day, I always tell them that it's on outcome. You want
Yes.
your outcome to be, let's say, you want me to take you to your $1 to $10 million journey. Tell me I'll take 12 months for it. And per month, my retainer would be this much. Instead of saying work for 20 hours in a month and I'll charge you this much, they're going to say, okay, so you're going to come in a week, 5 days, you're going to come 1 hour. How are you going to be productive? So it doesn't make sense most of the time. And the startup founders or the CEOs, they get very jittery and they say, okay, no, it doesn't work for me. I need somebody full time. So instead of that, I would always say outcome. If you're a marketing CMO, tell them that I'll build a demand generation. I'll ensure that you get 100 leads by end of this month and this. So it's very important to do that. I love what you said also. So that makes
I,
sense. So
I do think, though, I'll just add one more point in here. There is kind of a balance of like, yes, outcome based, but to be able to protect yourself as a fractional, I've learned this the hard way, is that the reason day rates are really helpful is because they're a little bit more safe feeling for people who aren't used to outcome based. And also, sometimes consultants say outcome based. They'll be like, I will do this project, whatever. And so, the reason I'm really strong about, I think the best model is a day rate. And the one that I like the most personally, that my go to, is 2.5 days. Because what happens is 2.5 days is 4 days of me being half day in the company, plus a lingering half day for me to check emails and Slacks. And that keeps me within scope, because if any one day I'm finding that I'm working a full day and then I'm having to work multiple full days, or I'm having to do tons and tons of emails and Slacks and things that are taking up my time, it's really concrete for me to explain to somebody that I'm going past 2.5 of 5 days. Whereas outcome based is a lot harder if it's like just on a retainer, because they're still feeling a little bit like, oh, but where's your hours and time, you know? And so symbolically saying, out of a 5 day week, I'm around on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm your Tuesday and Thursday lady, right? Like, that makes people feel safer.
it's very important to understand what's the requirement is and then pivot yourself in 2.5 days. I love that concept of 2 days. Probably I'll borrow it from you now. Maybe.
Yeah, please.
So I mean, this has been amazing. Now we'll go to the fun segment. I could have another 1 hour session with you. I think so we can.
Absolutely.
But in the interest of time, let's do a little bit fun. It's a rapid fire. I
Okay,
ask
cool.
you a question, you have to answer it quickly. Okay?
Boy,
We'll start with the simple one. Coffee or tea while closing a deal?
coffee. I need all the coffee.
Zoom fatigue or airplane jet lag? Which is
Gosh,
worse?
in this phase of life, Zoom fatigue
Yeah.
for sure. In my last phase of life, it would be jet lag.
Most overused buzzword in sales right now.
Oh, right now is AI. My gosh. Ugh,
It's like
AI.
it's a noise going everywhere. So I
Yeah.
agree. Oracle, Cisco, or startup life, which taught you the most?
My gosh. Oh, they have all taught me very different things, but honestly, the most would be startup life for sure. Been the hardest.
Now I'm going to touch sensitive. San Francisco, London, or New Zealand?
Oh, I mean, New Zealand, because I've ended up here.
So better invention for a remote work, Slack or noise canceling headphones.
Oh, a better invention for so you mean like what's something you could use as an alternative to it? Man, what about like a whole bubble that you could travel in that's not just headphones, but you have like a comfy couch and, like a thing of coffee and I want like a whole pod that I could travel in.
I love that. Worst advice you ever received about building a company.
Oh my gosh, so much. So many things. I think the worst one is it's impossible for you to have a family and also be a leader, and I was told that explicitly.
Okay. Last one. Most ridiculous request you have gotten as a fractional CR.
Oh gosh, I know it off the top of my head, which is that they needed a voiceover on some kind of marketing collateral and wanted someone with a different accent than the local one. So they used me just because I had an American accent. And American accents aren't that great. Like, I really don't know what they were thinking. And so I had to do a whole voiceover of something that wasn't very good. And then everyone kind of made it awkward that they just pretended like they were going to use it and they definitely didn't. It turned out terrible.
This was amazing, informative, fun, Michelle. It was lovely. Any last word before I say but thank you?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mahesh. It's so nice to be on here. And, I would just encourage anybody who wants to see what we're up to at Fractional Directory. We're in Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, but certainly open for companies throughout the rest of Asia Pacific and the world to hire from those talent pools.
I think so. For the audience, yes, please go ahead. Once the podcast goes live, you will see the link of Michelle's LinkedIn. You can go reach out to her, check the directory and, connect with her. I mean, it's fun. Michelle, it was lovely talking to you and so much information, so much to learn from you. Thank you very much for doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Revenue Circle with Mahesh. If you found value in today's conversation, take a moment to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You'll never miss an episode filled with actionable insights to fuel your business growth. The Revenue Circle is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all leading streaming platforms. Want to continue the conversation? Connect with Mahesh on LinkedIn or visit our website at rorrglobal.com. Until next time, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep completing your revenue circle.